So when Alex says I'm the expert from starting from scratch, what that means is that I started with the least knowledge. So the first thing I would want to say to you is if you have the enthusiasm and God has given you a direction to do something, then the people will come around you and will make it work. So I would want to just encourage you that when I started the Easter play, I had no experience of theatre at all, and I'd never acted in anything at all. I had a strong driver, and that was that you're probably aware Edinburgh is quite a capital city for lots of big events, and what was happening at Easter was that a big events company from down south was planning all these secular events at Easter. And that they were essentially closing roads and had various things going on in the gardens. And actually there's quite a lot of Christians who are struggling to get to church during the Easter week. So this was sort of brought to my attention. I thought, gosh, this really is not right. And if we don't claim this space fairly soon as a Christian community, we're not going to, it's going to get harder and harder to get in there. So for me, it was just about a sense of, let's stand up and celebrate Easter and be seen to celebrate Easter as Christians. And how can I do that? And I feel it was God's leading to take me to watch a play in London, which was a South African play, a mystery play. And as I was sitting there in the auditorium watching this, I thought an Easter play in Princes Street Gardens that would meet the needs of what we're trying to do and claim that space, rather than having all sorts of a jazz concert and all sorts of things was going on, but nothing that was of a Christian celebration. So in terms of how do you start, I think a key thing is getting some identity and getting things really quite visual so that you can get other people on board. So I happen to know a girl who was just starting out in graphic design. Again, wasn't any expert like me, but she did me a lovely logo. Can't really say, but essentially the logo went onto everything, and the logo went right onto everything, even though it was just me and a couple of people at the beginning. And although that sounds quite corporate, what I would say is it gives you a bit of resonance, and people can see that you're serious about something. So we had this Princes Street Easter play with a big foot and a cross, and the 5 toes were going to be the because it's on the move between 5 scenes, and that just went on to all our communication right from the beginning with these little feet across the bottom. And we fairly early on in our this was back in 2003, but got a website together fairly on, just a basic website, but it just provided the focus for people starting to communicate. So it may well be that if you're starting a passion play, you're quite a creative person. I suppose what I would say is it's worth just getting some of these foundational things to consider, because it brings people together and provides a bit of a structure. And we had a strap line that said "Christ in the heart of the city at Easter." So when people say, well, why are you doing the Easter play? We said, because we want to make it about Christ in the heart of the city at Easter. And this was in contrast to the secular events that were happening. So just thinking of some way, it may be for you that it's not a logo, but some way that is quite visual in terms of getting people understanding what you're doing. And then just staying with things that are visual. I suppose I did a bit of the donkey work, just walking around the gardens, taking photographs, thinking where could scenes be, how could this work. And if you have one prayer right at the beginning, I would just make it your prayer, Lord, bring me the people I need who have the skills that I don't have. And the only skill I had was in bringing people together, and I didn't really have any of the skills for a passion play. I needed people who did have the skills, and by goodness, it was such a boost to my faith that one after the other God brought people with experience. And one of the people shortly after that came across my path was a girl who was interested in stage design, and she put these together, which were just so this is an area from Princes Street Gardens. It's a shelter. People tend to sit in it and have a drink. It can be a place where folk who have got a bit of a drink problem just sit. But she created it into, so this was Pilate's Palace, and if you know the gardens are all on a slope. And for the first couple of years, this is where Pilate's Palace was, and she superimposed Pilate's Palace onto it. And she just was able to put these boards together, and the value of this, and it depends a little bit the size of your the play and how central it's going to be, but these were incredibly useful when I came to have meetings with the council, because I could just convey people wouldn't necessarily be able to visualize a passion play. Some people in our modern world don't really know the story of a passion play. What does it involve? So having something, again, very visual. So this is just like a scene board here that she put together, enables people to who might be a bit cautious or might have objections, or conversely people who are really enthusiastic and want to come on board, and it gives them ideas about where they could fit in, where they could take part in what you're trying to do. But also for council members, sharing these boards enabled them to feel confident and clear about what we were going to be doing. So just keeping things really visual right from the start, I think is really worth it. The other thing that is, I think, probably more complicated now than it used to be, so I don't know whether this advice would still hold, but I did set it up as a charity right from the very beginning, and I think charity law has got a lot more complex, and that probably may not be advice that stands any longer, but it did have financially a big benefit. I'd say probably now just weigh up the complexity of setting up a charity versus the financial gain from gift aid. But certainly for Edinburgh being a capital city, I prayed for a councillor there was one councillor who was Conservative already who was interested in the church, and then a Labour councillor came on board, and another councillor, sort of SNP councillor was on board as well. So that gave me the cross-party support within the council. And finding your way through the council workings is really useful. If you can find someone who understands the workings of the council so that you go straight to the decision makers, I would really advise. So in Edinburgh, I'd never heard of something called an EPOG, but there may be something similar in other cities that you're involved with, and that's the Events Planning Organisation Group. So an EPOG the council bring together, if you want to do an event, whether it's a walk or whatever the event is within a city, that brings together the police, the event organisers, the people like the parks department, the people who are in charge of toilets, people who are in charge of closing roads. All these people are then all together in one room, and that provides a really good decision making place. Now that may be unique to Edinburgh, I don't know, but finding out how your council sets itself up for events and just doing your background work on that is really worth it. In terms of connecting with your audience and getting your getting your profile up as a production, the other bit of advice I would say is think how you can make it connect locally. So our narrator was St Andrew, as patron saint of Scotland. We had in the music when Jesus was being crucified, and I'm very, very grateful to the person who took on the music. She spent a long time really thinking about the music for the play, and absolutely got it right for the crucifixion, which was Be Thou My Vision, sung in Gaelic, and sung very quite slowly and contemplatively. So whether there's anything locally that you can just make connections with, then that just, it sort of helps media and publicity and what have you. The other thing I would say is go looking for people in surprising places. So I remember fairly near the start, so I was visiting different churches trying to recruit actors. So it meant being at a different church most Sundays, and I was visiting a church in quite an impoverished area that had quite a small and elderly congregation. And I suppose I was thinking, it's another Sunday out and I'm not sure there's going to be much comes back from this congregation. Okay, so that's when you need to say your prayers and say you got it wrong, because a key person came from that congregation. So you can imagine Princes Street Gardens is a World Heritage Site, and we were wanting to put a cross up there. And we needed to do that carefully and to consider the turf and to consider the landscape and everything like that. And we, raising the cross is a big structure, and I really wanted somebody who would just take everything on to do with the cross, the design, the construction, the transport of it. A cross coordinator is basically what I was looking for, and I hadn't got one, and I hadn't got someone with the skills for that. And sitting in the congregation was a guy who was just out of the army, lodging with one of the elderly ladies, who was a construction engineer, and that was just his thing. And he just took that and ran with it and did a really, really good job getting all the design sorted, getting it through permission, getting it made, getting it transported. And it was actually very, I'm sure it was a very kind of anointing thing for him, because he was Irish, and for him it meant a lot to him to do a very cross-denominational project, and was his first experience of that. So yeah, don't underestimate where people are going to come from, and keep an open mind. And just I think if you're leading and heading up a passion play, one of your key roles is to see skills in people that they might not otherwise have perhaps thought, and just empower them to use those skills. So another very key person was a lady who came up to me at the end of a play, and she said, I don't know what I can do, but I really want to be part of this. And she handed me a card, and on it was Mrs. Jeeves, and she was just starting up a little company whereby she was setting herself up, so she was retired, to go and sit in people's houses and receive deliveries if they needed them, and also just to coordinate, say, a package, or coordinate something that they needed doing in their lives. So it was very, very broad. And she said, I love people and I love coordinating. And I rang her up and I said, would you like to meet? And she said, yes, that'd be great. And I thought, what I really need is a costumes coordinator. So I met with her and I said, you don't by any chance sew, do you? And she said, I hate sewing. And I thought, I've got this wrong. And I said, oh, I'm sorry. I asked you that question because I was wondering about a costumes coordinator. And she said, I'm sure I could coordinate costumes. I could do that. She said, but don't ask me to sew. But she was brilliant at just getting a team of women together, and getting them sewing, and was very, very facilitative and all of that. What she did do was dye in her washing machine about 100 metres of cheesecloth, and she just kept on dyeing all this cheesecloth and providing. So we bought cheesecloth as a big one lot, and then she dyed it all the different colours, and loved doing that. And that was her role. And then she ended up going out to Africa with one of Alex's dad's projects, and coordinating a costume team out there, and being involved in an African passion play. So yeah, just it's not to be put off by that initial I hate sewing, but allowing people to find their sort of a place, and believing that God's in it. So I felt I was meant to call her and ask her about being a costume coordinator, and that was right, even though it felt wrong. But if it had felt right initially, just kind of run with it. It's my tip.